The Orange Box, a classic compilation of video games originally released by Valve in late 2007. It included some of the most influential games of the 2000s, such as Team Fortress 2, Half-Life 2, and Portal. But one thing that some may not know is that there was a bonus game also included in the original PC release. Peggle Extreme, a short Peggle crossover game featuring levels themed around the Valve games of the Orange Box. Is it possible that this unsuspecting game could be the most influential of them all? No, obviously not. I mean, I love Peggle, but come on. In any case, Peggle Extreme quickly became a free-to-play game for anyone on Steam, and it remains as such to this day. Right now you can go and download it and still enjoy the 10 classic Peggle levels and 5 challenges included in the game. And of course, being a part of the Orange Box and being free to play, lots of people do remember playing it when they were younger. Funnily enough, for being someone who has done so many videos about Peggle, I didn't actually play any of the games until I was 25, but hey, since then I've done my fair share of pegging.
Huh?
Nostalgia combined with the low barrier to entry led to Peggle Extreme seeing some of its first speedruns as early as 2014. And a decade later, Peggle Extreme has now seen hundreds of speedruns. If we take a brief look at the Any% records, we see a few names that you might recognize if you watched my Peggle Deluxe Any% video. But this video is not about Peggle Extreme's Any% history. With only 10 levels, beating Peggle Extreme in adventure mode barely leaves you enough time to process that the run has started before it's already over. There are other games like this too, where the Any% mode is just extremely short. Of course, there is the classic ones such as Super Mario Bros., and one that I actually did play as a kid was Super Mario Bros. 3, where the Any% record is only 3 minutes long for that game. So in cases like this, what do speedrunners do to show further mastery of the game? Well, lots of times speedrunners move on and start mastering 100% speedruns, completing everything a game has to offer. And Peggle Extreme is no different. This is the story of how Peggle speedrunners mastered Peggle Extreme's 100% category, Extreme Grandmaster. So if you're watching this video, you probably have an idea of how Peggle works. If you don't, I recommend going back and watching my Peggle Deluxe Any% history video, where I go into much greater detail about the core mechanics of Peggle. For this video, we'll be mainly focusing on the specifics of Peggle Extreme and its 100% category. And to do that, it's always good to start at the beginning. So let's give a little bit of context. As mentioned, Peggle Extreme being a free-to-play Steam game means it's always had plenty of people playing it, and the barrier to entry for speedrunning it is quite low. However, although the speedrunning history of the game dates back to the mid-2010s, for a long time there was no 100% category for the game. I actually spent a good bit of time researching to see if there was discussion for making a category like that for the game, but there wasn't really too much. The first mention I could really find was on the speedrun.com forums in 2020, and funnily enough, the poster of the forum post, Puppis, is now one of the main moderators for most of the Peggle games on the website. Unfortunately, it didn't get any traction at this point in time, and to be fair, there wasn't a ton of Peggle activity around that time in general. So when did that change? Well, I think it helps to get a broad perspective on Peggle speedrunning's timeline. I would tend to split Peggle speedrunning into two eras, pre-DukeDunac and post-DukeDunac. In my Deluxe Any% video, I discussed how DukeDunac speedrunning Peggle in 2021 and 2022 brought in a lot of new people, including myself. And while there have been other big influences too, Peggle speedrunning took on a whole new life in 2021 and beyond. Of course, even with the post-Doug boom, there have been different key moments. Early on, there were quite a few new runners of the game, all rapidly improving, and around this time there was a massive proliferation of strats. This early adoption period was almost like a bunch of seeds being planted. After a while, many of these new players began to sprout, so to speak. Runners began putting a lot more time into the game and improving quite a bit. And finally, as many of these players became Peggle experts, many of them did what lots of speedrunners do once they start gaining mastery over a certain game. They begin conquering its other categories, fanning out their efforts like branches, reaching towards the light of any and all categories they could compete in. And so several avid speedrunners of the games began to take notice of Peggle Extreme, being one of the classic Peggle games. This really started happening in early 2023, and around this time, the first 100% speedrun of Peggle Extreme was finally completed, and with it, a board was created for the category. And so, in April of 2023, The first run was completed by a runner that we've actually seen in a few of my other Peggle videos, Britsha. Let's dive right into the run. A 100% speedrun of Peggle Extreme has a few key requirements. You must complete an adventure mode playthrough of the game's 10 levels, you must full clear all of these 10 levels, and you must complete the game's 5 challenges. Now that seems pretty straightforward, but what makes it a bit interesting is that some of these objectives can be combined. For instance, as we watch Britsha tackle the first level, we can see that he goes for and successfully gets a full clear during the initial adventure mode playthrough. In fact, since you must play through the levels anyways, it's ideal to get as many full clears as possible in this way. But it doesn't just end there with multiple objectives being completed at once. On the second level of the game, Britsha has the potential to clear 3 objectives at once. Beyond beating the level and full clearing it, one of the game's 5 challenges relates to this level, to get 300,000 points on this level. Let's pause for just a moment to talk about the challenges and why this matters. If you didn't know, the 2 main classic Peggle games, Peggle Deluxe and Peggle Knights, have slightly different core mechanics. There's a lot of very minor things, such as the ball buckets being shaped very slightly differently, certain mastery abilities being tweaked, and things like that. But one major change that affects 100% speedruns of the games is how challenges work. In Peggle Knights, challenges cannot ever be completed in adventure mode or quick play mode, even if the conditions are all there. But in Peggle Deluxe they can be, leading to what can kinda be called routing for 100% speedruns. Certain challenges can be completed during the any percent part of the run, and certain full clears can be done during the challenges. How that works in Peggle Deluxe is a story for another day, but the interesting thing for our story here is that Peggle Extreme was built on the same framework of Peggle Deluxe. And what this means is that several of the objectives in Extreme's 100% speedrun can actually overlap. The 5 challenges that the game has are 2 score-related challenges where you must get 300k points on level 1-2 and 350k points on level 1-3. 2 extra orange challenges where you must beat level 2-1 with 35 orange pegs and level 1-5 with 45 orange pegs. And finally, a full clear challenge for the first level in the game. So you might be able to see the idea. Since all levels need to be full cleared anyways, full clearing the first level will automatically complete that challenge. And if you're able to rack up the points on the second and third levels, those challenges can also be completed towards the start of a run as well. The only ones that can't be completed in this way are the extra orange challenges, because they have special conditions that make them different from a normal playthrough of those levels. However, what's really interesting is that even those can be doubled up in the opposite way. Even though they can't be completed in adventure mode, you can get credit for the full clears for those levels if you full clear them during the challenge mode instead. All of this makes an EGM run of Peggle Extreme quite a bit different than an any percent run. Full clearing levels is quite difficult, and getting high scores can also provide an extra challenge that requires a specific skill set. As we get back to the run, Britsha is able to both full clear the second level as well as rack up score on it by freeballing. By repeatedly getting shots directly into the bucket from a single peg, you can build up a combo, and if you get 10 in a row, you get 100,000 points. Britsha unfortunately messes this strategy up on this level towards the end of one of his chains, but by freeballing he has still left himself with enough to be able to full clear the level anyways. Full clearing guarantees you another 100,000 points at the end regardless, and so he's barely able to get the 300k points, but he does get them for the second level. The third level, with its associated 350k challenge, starts with this amazing shot.
Oh, you can actually get a start where you get a long shot there as well.
Getting a slide like that instantly nets Britsha 50k points, and it opens up the level quite nicely. Funnily enough, this shot is actually a tap strat, one of the many strats that I did discuss in my any percent video for Peggle Deluxe. So even though it looks quite sick, this shot is 100% reliable to get. Britsha follows this up with a long shot, getting another 25k points. And the rest of the level plays out quite nicely, and after freeballing his way through it all, he destroys the 350k challenge. And now that those first few levels and their linked challenges are out of the way, Britsha just needs to beat and full clear the rest of the levels, and then mop up those last 2 challenges. That is a bit easier said than done though. As he continues on, he loses on 1-4 2 times while hunting the full clear, before finally getting it on attempt 3. It is much harder than it might look at first glance. 1.5 goes off without a hitch, and Britsha enters the second set of levels. On 2-1, Britsha actually has specific pixel shots prepared that help clear the 2 large rings. Even in the very first run of this category, pixel shots were already a major thing, so in every record you can expect to see pixel shots used to open up the levels. Oh yeah, one thing I should note by the way is that normally in the mainline Peggle games you'd get a new character here, but Extreme only lets you use Bjorn the whole time, which is another reason it can be a bit tricky, honestly. Unfortunately, Britsha still has a bit of trouble full clearing the level, and it takes him 2 fails before he's finally able to beat and full clear it. Level 2-2 is quite an iconic looking one, but it ends up being a pain to full clear with its weird brick angles. Britsha is able to freeball his way down to the very last few pegs when... yeah, that's pretty rough. Luckily he does get it on his second try. On level 2-3, the levels ramp up even further in complexity, introducing portals. Luckily there's a few unique pixel shots developed that allow Britsha to do this at the start of the level. He then goes on to beat the rest of the level by a thin margin, ending with this absolutely beautiful shot. Level 2-4 continues the portal madness, this time with the level blocked off into 3 sections and 2 sets of linked portals. It can sometimes be a bit nasty to full clear, and Britsha has a couple of unfortunate attempts. Eventually though, he does continue on to the final level. 2-5 has no blockers, but the portal shenanigans continue. It takes a few attempts, but Britsha is able to finish out the adventure mode playthrough part of the run, having full cleared every level and with only 2 challenges remaining. The benefit of having already gotten all the full clears is that there's now no need to do them during the challenges, so Britsha tears right into them and ends up finishing the run with a 38.09.
Oh, right. Well, technically I'm finished, so...
With several fails, Britsha knew this run could be improved, and he said as much himself.
Man, I had so many errors.
You actually won.
Thank you. It's like 7 failures.
With Britsha's run, Peggle Extreme EGM became an official category. And with the game being fairly short, free to play, and already having quite a few any % runs, you might expect that other Pegglers would take a shot at it. But here's where I need to come clean about something. This category has never seen a crazy amount of competition. In fact, without getting too far ahead of ourselves, as of late 2024 when I'm making this video, only 4 people have run this category at all. But hear me out. I think there's an interesting discussion to be had when it comes to something like this, because it relates to an interesting question for me. What is the spirit or the essence of speedrunning? What drives speedruns? The answer to that question will vary depending on who you ask. One of my favorite speedrunners, Virtual, once said something that stuck with me, and even though he was talking more about challenge runs, I think the same logic applies.
Most of the challenges that I do aren't so much about Trackmania, the game itself. It's just the outlet that I use to experience mastery. These challenges are about me, about applying myself to a goal and doing what I have to see it through. Starting out on a journey that at first feels impossible, and committing the necessary hours of work and patience to see it through until you at long last reach the finish line is one of the greatest feelings there is, and I highly recommend it.
I also reached out to Mitriz, a very prolific Souls game speedrunner, and I asked him what he thought about the essence of speedrunning. He emphasized that the optimization and the continual improvement that you can do are what make it so fun and rewarding to speedrun. Now, of course, everyone is going to have slightly different perspectives, but for me personally, I would say there's 3 main things that I put at the core of speedrunning: competition, self-improvement, and achievement. Of course, these are linked intrinsically too. The hunt for speedrunning achievements can often drive competition, competition can be the drive for self-improvement, and of course the grind for an achievement can be as well. In the context of Britsha's run, there was no competition for the record since he was the first to run it. And although he said that he wanted to improve, he wouldn't end up coming back to the category for quite some time. But he did achieve something with this run. Even if everyone knew it was possible to do a 100% speedrun of Peggle Extreme, no one had actually sat down and done it until he had, and in that way, he proved it was achievable. And of course, now that one person had done a run, it did pave the way for others. Britsha would soon find his competition. This is where we must introduce someone who is pivotal not only to this story, but also for the speedrunning history of Peggle Extreme as a whole. And that runner's name is HeliosWx. Helios has long been a top runner of Peggle. In my deluxe any % video, I covered how in that category, which is Peggle's most competitive one, he was second at multiple points in time, and he was the third player to ever cross the 50-minute barrier. But even before all that, leading up to late 2023, he decided to work on an ambitious goal. Since Peggle Extreme is a bit of a smaller game with not as many categories as the other large Peggle games, Helios thought it would be possible to sweep the entire leaderboard for the game at once. He got to work, grinding all of the main categories and all of the IL record times too. And of course, all this practice eventually led to him working his way up to EGM. Let's dive right in. The run starts off well enough. Just like in Britsha's runs, he gets through the first 3 levels easily enough, which is not really surprising, seeing as with a relatively short run like this, it's much more common to reset if there's any issues this early on in the run. With the points challenges completed for 1-2 and 1-3, Helios began working on full clearing the rest. On 1-4, we can see that Helios has implemented a pretty intense sequence of pixel shots. For each of the first 3 shots, he lines up his cursor with very specific pixels, and we can see how good these are at opening up the level in a guaranteed way, and leaving him with the full 10 balls after the fact. However, even so, some of the bricks that are left over can be a bit weird to freeball, and well, Helios has to try the level again. On the second try he does get it, and he moves on. None of the next several levels give him much issue. On 2-4, we can see another case where a series of shots absolutely decimates the level. And same on 2-5, where specific shots absolutely destroy the top structures. Unfortunately, he does have another tough ending situation on 2-5, and ends up failing to a really tough brick shot. Even on the second attempt, it's looking pretty dicey, what with a teleporter blocking the path to the last remaining brick, but what a shot. And with that, Helios beats the any % part of the run, including having full cleared all 10 levels, and he quickly moves on to the last 2 extra orange challenges, neither of which are much of a challenge to a seasoned speedrunner like Helios. He ends the run with a 22:28. It's worth pointing out just how much time this saved over Britsha's original record, and the biggest reason why is just less level fails. Britsha had quite a few fails spread across several levels, whereas Helios only had 2 fails plus a few quick resets. A big reason for this is a lot of the new opening shots that have been developed since Britsha's run, but I also just want to take a second to admire some of the great shots that Helios took. For instance, at the end of 1-3, he only has 2 balls to clear 5 blue pegs. Instead of freeballing each of them, which could be weird given the brick and the blockers on this level, Helios ends up doing this shot. It was a bit of a calculated risk, but it paid off huge, and shots like that are one thing that Helios excels at. So in the end, Helios now had the record, and it was a pretty respectable one too. Some of the strats and shots might make it look easy, but I promise you that this game is tough. Beyond having weird layouts for quite a few levels, you can only use Bjorn, and while in the any % part of the run, you don't even get to use his power until the 3rd level, and levels don't have purple pigs until the 4th level, meaning that if you do want to double up and get the points challenges during the first part of the run, you have to do it without all the tools you'd normally have at your disposal. In any case, Helios had taken the record way down, and with it, he completed his sweep of the game's records. Although technically there was an unsubmitted IL record from Crazy Tone Dog that was before that and was only discovered later, but shh. And for a category that only had one other run, surely this run would stay for quite some time, right? Would it last for weeks, months, years? Well, it would last for 3 days.
Bruh.
Yeah, unfortunately for Helios, his sweep was short-lived. And the funniest thing is, the person who took the record had not even done it for the purpose of taking away the sweep, but rather for a speedrunning project of their own. And that runner was Narcolepsy. Narcolepsy is an interesting member of the Peggle community. Not only does he have a top 10 time in Deluxe Any %, but if you've ever dabbled in high score leaderboards on Cyberscore, you can go to Peggle Deluxe's page and see that he's also the dominant high score record holder for that game. He has a fairly diverse skill set when it comes to Peggle, which is why in late 2023, when Helios was working on his sweep, something no one had ever done, Narcolepsy was working on something else that no one else had ever done, the Capstone Run. The idea for the Capstone Run was pretty simple. Out of the classic era of Peggle games, there's 4 main entries: Peggle Deluxe, Peggle Extreme, Peggle Knights, and Peggle World of Warcraft Edition. The Capstone Run would be a 100% speedrun of all 4 games, all in one sitting and one massive speedrun. And ironically, Peggle Extreme was the shortest of these runs. Even still, Narcolepsy wanted to make sure that he was prepared for all of the runs, and so he began grinding. And he quickly began to see results. With a mix of strategies that Helios had used, as well as some of his own, Narcolepsy began to bring his time down. Funnily enough, as he did so, he even commiserated with Helios himself. The two both knew that the other was grinding, and they regularly discussed strats and problems they had while improving, even if they were both focusing on the category for different reasons. And so Narcolepsy kept pushing. Let's talk about his final and only submitted run. Narcolepsy is a very calculating player, and is one of the few players who fairly consistently runs 100% categories of the games, and we can see his skill in that area coming through right away. On 1-3, Narcolepsy uses the normal opening strategy to open up the level, but we then see a very specific full clearing philosophy come into play. Clear out structures in the middle of the level, especially bricks, so that freeballing becomes much more straightforward on the back half of the level. Once he does this, the level is fairly straightforward to clean up. We can see this strategy again on 2-2, where there's a huge emphasis on getting shots that clear multiple bricks, so that the rest of the normal pegs can be dealt with on their own. This greatly simplifies the process for getting through these levels, and from a mental perspective, if you've already cleared the harder parts of a level, you then know you can start to take more risky but efficient shots with the balls that you have left. One thing that's interesting to note is that Narcolepsy actually doesn't full clear 1-5 and 2-1 in this part of the run. This goes back to the routing thing I talked about earlier. The full clears can actually be completed in the extra orange challenges for those 2 levels. On the final stage, Narcolepsy gets to a bit of a rough position with some unlucky angles towards the end, getting down to only 1 ball with 5 pegs left. But like any good freeballer, this does not rattle him. All it takes is lining up and focusing on one shot at a time. After just under 17 minutes, Narcolepsy is on to the last 2 challenges. Keep in mind, he does need to full clear these 2 levels as well. "1948. The last 10-minute barrier for this category had been broken, and with it, a new world record, and Helios' sweep was broken too." And before we move on, I do want to also mention as an aside that Narcolepsy did do his capstone run. On the 10th of November 2023, a few weeks after getting this record, he 100%ed every classic Peggle game back-to-back over the course of almost 16 hours. He remains the only person to ever accomplish this feat. Our speedrunning history here is not over quite yet, but I do want to pause here for a moment. Earlier I mentioned how, to me, the essence of speedrunning comes down to three things: competition, self-improvement, and achievement. So the elephant in the room is probably how, besides the brief friendly rivalry between Helios and Narcolepsy, there hasn't been much competition in this category. After the runs we've seen, the fourth person to ever run the category was SatanHerself, another avid Peggle speedrunner, and she only did that much later, in late 2024. So why is the category so overlooked? Well, for one thing, it is still relatively young. But I would argue that there's another sort of conundrum with it as well. The Peggle speedrunning community at a top level has gotten very skillful, to the point where it's fairly rare for a new, random person to instantly rise to the top. By the time Extreme EGM became a new category, each of the three runners we've seen were already top runners. And what this has meant is that pretty much right away, the record was fairly hard to beat, especially since it's such a short run, where at a certain point there isn't as much to improve. It leads to a weird sort of situation where the category is hard enough that lots of new players are intimidated by it, and for veteran players, the level of competition means that to have any chance of getting a record or a top time, you'll probably need to grind for a good while. And as a result, the category has been a bit overlooked by both groups. And you know, I think that's kind of a shame. Peggle Extreme is, again, completely free to download, and pretty much any computer made since the year 2000 can run it. That's a crazy low bar for entry, yet it still has almost no runs from anyone outside of the few top runners who have played it. And I don't think that speedrunning should just be about the top runs for this run or any run. One of my favorite speedruns of all time that I've ever done was an all achievements run of Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. I'm one of only 3 people to ever submit that run, and my run is hours slower and much worse than either of the others who have, yet I'm still pretty proud of that run. I had to self-improve to even be able to finish it. Finishing it was definitely a personal achievement at the very least, and even though my run is absolutely thrashed by the competition, I was just happy to be able to compete at all, especially since I was able to compete against Lil Aggie, one of the people who got me into speedrunning to begin with. The point is that even if you're brand new to a game, you can still compete. You can of course self-improve, whether that be one time or over the course of hundreds of runs, and you can still achieve things. It might not be a new world record, but you can set your own goals and achieve them. Now, I hear what you might be thinking to yourself right now. All of this seems a bit preachy for a guy who hasn't even run the category he's talking about. And that's true, I mentioned it before, but only 4 people have run this category, and I am not one of them. Here's the thing. I lied. Or at least I left out the fact that I did run the category a few weeks ago, right before I started making this video. My time is not good at all. I used essentially 0 advanced strategies, and I haven't grinded it at all, at least not yet. But I ran it because I want to stand by my word when I challenge other people to do something. Because that's what this is. If you've ever had an interest in Peggle or speedrunning, I challenge you to run Peggle Extreme EGM. I would love to see more people compete at all levels, and if you're looking for a goal time to beat, try to beat mine. I'll include some info about where you can start if you want to in the description of this video, including a link to a fairly comprehensive guide on strats made by SatanHerself. And if you do beat my time and get it onto the speedrun.com leaderboard, tell me in a comment what your username is on there, and I might have a small surprise for you. But enough of my yapping, we still have one more record to go over. A couple weeks after both Helios and Narcolepsy ran the game and brought the record down, there would be one more record improvement, and this time it really would be an example of self-improvement, being from one of the 3 previous record holders. Would it be Helios reclaiming his sweep? Would it be Narcolepsy pushing his lead further ahead of the competition? No, it was Britsha, back to try to reclaim the throne in a category that he had pioneered. On November 7th, 2023, Britsha started up a fateful stream. For hours he grinded the category, and he had even brought his PB time into the 20-minute range, but he wanted the record. It began approaching the time where he would need to wrap up his stream to eat and get to work, so he booted up one last attempt. The first levels went well. He decided to leave 1-5 and 2-1 full clears for the extra orange challenges, pushing on into the second half of the run. When he got to 2-3, he began to carefully line up his shots. One of the few notable time losses that Narcolepsy had during his run had been having to reset a few times on this level. Could Britsha pull it off first try?
It's better I waste that time trying to find the shot than, like, do it wrong. Bruh. But that's actually potentially really good. I think I go for it. There's so much stuff there. Yeah, okay.
He did, and the rest of the level went off without a hitch. On 2-5, he had a bit of a rough spot towards the end.
Okay, we're good. Go, okay, I have to just full clear these last 2 levels.
Britsha had achieved the self-improvement that he wanted, and his 18-minute flat record still stands today. We've talked a lot in this video about what it means to speedrun, but in the end, where the record goes and where it eventually lands, well, that's up for you to decide. If you enjoyed this video, I really would love to see more people give this category a shot. Also, this category is going to be at Awesome Games Done Quick
1 week
after this video is posted, and I'll be there as a commentator, in case you want to get a taste for what this run looks like as a live race. In any case, have a nice day.